Welcome again in the course of organic production. We are still in the lesson of soil fertility management. It is somehow a very long lesson because soil, it's not simple. Soil fertility, it's not simple too. And many factors and human practices can impact it. Being important and being not simple, this brings us to a long lecture. Even we have not for sure discussed everything because it is thought or it is presupposed that you have the basic knowledge. However, I could not put the concepts related to the organic agriculture or fertility management in a very friendly way without mentioning it. Even somehow I just passed through them. This slide is just presented in the previous parts of this lecture, but I wanted just to remind you. So we are in the soil fertility management in the crop rotation and use of legumes. Now, factors that are considered for planning rotation. You have the basic knowledge because I have presented them previously. Here is just to have a guide. I mean, it's like some tips that you have to consider when you are thinking about crop rotation and managing soil fertility. In case that you are planning a rotation, I wanted to remind you that you always have to include green manure and cover crops in order to prioritize the production of biomass. And this is in order to improve soil cover and organic matter content. So, for example, why to have soil cover? It is important to protect the soil by erosion. Of course, have other benefits, but here we are concentrated mainly to the benefits of rotation. The same species should never be sown on the same field in the following season. And you know, we spoke in the previous part about monocropping and monoculture. The green manure and cover crops should be adapted to the region's microclimate. You know that the climate change and we have microclimate because position, because territory, I mean relief, if there are mountains, hills, and so on. So the green manure and cover crops should be adapted to the region's microclimate, to the soil characteristics, and we have spoke about the soil characteristics, the farmer's production system, and the benefits of cash crops. You know from the previous part of the lecture that we're speaking about factors that we have to consider when we are going to plan a rotation. We discussed, for example, for root system building capacity, compatibility with the following crop, biomass production, nutritional requirements, and it is important to introduce in the rotation plan the crops or plants that conserve the nutrients, except the ones that use more or um, take more nutrients from the soil. The last one that in fact we'll speak in more details now in this part is we have to consider the degree of resistance to attacked or to be attacked by pests and disease, to consider which are the plants that can help us to have a better disease, weed and pest control. Speaking about uh, weed and pest management, in fact, here we face two different concepts. In conventional agriculture, people speak about protection against weed, disease, and pests. In fact, in organic agriculture, we have another concept. We speak about weed, disease, and pest management. So, not to kill them, but to create a system that creates its resilience and create balances. Organic farmers have no major problems with pests, with diseases and weeds. Plants and insect diversity creates a balance in the agroecosystem. Certain weed and pest problems that arise are usually linked to inappropriate crop rotations. Here I wanted to present some techniques, give some advice to consider when we are planning the rotations in order to have less problems with weeds. In general, for example, slow growing crops are not good, or it is not good to use or to plant them after another slow growing crop because we have higher infection with weeds. Slow growing crops, which are more susceptible to weed invasions, should follow weed suppressing crops. Weed suppressing crops usually are crops that have high biomass. Alternate between warm season and cool season crops so that you alternate your seedling dates, and because of that your tillage dates. And changing these dates of seedling and doing tillage, 1 year you can eradicate early germinating weeds, and the next year, changing the time of doing these activities in the farm, you suppress late germinating weeds. Another advice is include plants that have natural weed germination inhibitors. You know that the plants can live in the environment their chemicals, natural chemicals they produce usually. First, some of them can in fact help the other plant, and some of them are not good for the other plants. For example, like rye and sunflowers in the rotation, um, it is good to use them because they leave some kind of inhibitors for the weeds. Include forage legumes in the rotation. We have we have spoken about legumes. It is good for um, nutrients, soil capacity. But from the other side, legumes have another function in the rotation. They compete well with weeds. Another advice, include row crops that give the opportunity for mechanical weed control. Avoid too many years of perennial forage in the rotation, as this may encourage the growth of perennial weeds. If you have a particular problem like thistle, adjust the rotation. Thistle can be destroyed by clipping it at the bud stage. Then, every 21 days, use rod weeder. Introduce clover in the rotation with excellent control. 3 to 4 years of alfalfa hay. Grow pure stands of alfalfa, rye, and buckwheat to choke out persistent annual weeds. However, as I said some slides before, weeds are not enemies. They create biodiversity with ecological benefits. So we don't want to destroy weeds. We just want to manage in order not to have bad effects to the plants. For example, to take their light, to do shadow, and the plants that like light are suffering or will not give high production, or the weed can be competitor for the nutrients or can have a pest or disease that can infect the plant. So we're trying to understand which are the plants that fits to the plants. Weeds are beneficial because attract beneficiary insects and give shelter to them. Some weeds, I mean, are alternative food for beneficial insects, pollen, nectar, etc. Can serve as trap crops because they can attract pests that have preference for a particular weed. There are some weeds that can be repellent for some pests. So giving this list can be sometimes seems contradictory, but we have to know some plants or some weed plants can have in the relation with another plant one benefit or one drawback for them. We have just to know them and to plan, to consider during the rotation plan. As I was explaining previously, some weeds can be important for us because they can shelter the beneficiary insects. Here you have a list of 24 plants, including a group of species that are known as plants that even we will not cultivate. When we find in the fields or around them, we have to know that they offer shelter for the insects, beneficiary insects, and in this case, except the fact that they are a factor that influence the biodiversity, increase the biodiversity, not killing them. From the other side, they will help us in managing pests. I'm offering to you, or I'm giving to the platform a list of these plants, except you find them here. In order to save time and not to stay to mention here one by one, you will have this list in a repository of the documents related to this lecture, and you can use it for your, not only for learning, as well you can use them in the practice who is practicing the organic farming or farming in general, because this doesn't mean that you can consider this plant only when you are doing organic agriculture. However, we know that they are beneficiary plants and have to try to manage them and to keep them in the field. In the permaculture practices, one of the practices that they use is having as much possible flowers and plants that attract the beneficiary insects, different beneficiary insects, here including the bees too. Some of the plants can attract the bees, and you see there, you see in the next photos, you will have some photos after this slide, and you'll see how nice and how beautiful are these plants when they flourish. Okay, you have Achillea millefolium. These have other medicinal effects and use in pharmaceuticals and in the kitchen and in the folk medicine or popular medicine or alternative medicine. The other plant, lacy flower here, for example, from my experience now living in Albania, I see it very rarely. And remembering 30 years ago or more, this plant was everywhere, especially on the border of the fields. And now we don't find it. I mean, at least, I don't know in your countries, but I rarely can see it. Very few plants, very few exemplars. And that time we didn't know how to say good was for the field to have this kind of plant around. And I remember when I was a small child that our parents were not allowing us to take it because it has a bad smell for our nose. The other plant, Anatum graveolens, these have a nice smell and we use it in the kitchen and other uses. Here you have another photo of two other plants or weeds that we can find in different fields that we have to understand they have a very positive role to our fields, to our cultivations or crops. Here, the asteroides family. These are nice, beautiful too, and are plants that shelter the beneficiary insect. Cosmos bipinatus, common boneset, Eriogonum species. All of them we know. We find often them in Mediterranean. And many times we don't know how important are they for our crops and for the health of the ecosystem. Sunflowers, we cultivate, and all of them know it. Mountain mint, it is somehow an endemic plant. We don't find often it. At least I don't find often it in Albania. I have seen it, for example, it was interesting, I have seen it in Heraklion, in the island, in an island of Greece. Okay, let's go to other slide to show the plants. You see, you have presenting here 3 species. These species you have in the list that I gave in the previous slides, and you will have the possibility to see this list, as I said, as a separated file that you can download. three other species here, very beautiful and very nice. Not all of them smell well, but for special insects, they are a very preferred shelter. Other species, two other species here. And the last one is Phacelia. Sometimes, for example, if we leave the soil in the form of fallow, this plant can be grown very very dense, and then it can be a problem. We have to know that Phacelia is a weed plant that can host beneficiary insects and can help the crops. We have to control it, we have to manage it, but not to destroy it at all. We have to try to keep a kind of balance. We have to manage it that we can take the beneficiary characteristics, we can benefit of it, and from the other side, to not leave it be disturbed for the other crops. Continue to speak about weeds or weed plants that can be beneficial to the our main crop because they attract beneficial insects or shelter them. It is important to mention here that most of the representatives of the plants that attract the beneficial insects, and there are in the group of weeds, are included in two main families, in Composites and Umbellifera. Here I can mention, for example, Tanacetum vulgare, which attract lady beetles, small wasps, lace wings, flies, etc. Tagetes signata is another important plant which attracts small wasps and spiders. Cosmos epinatus attracts syrphids, lacewings, spiders, bugs, etc. So other species of the insects. Umbellifera, we have here, for example, Carum carvi, which attracts syrphids, lacewings, spiders. And Netum graveolus attracts ladybugs, syrphids, wasps. And Phoenicum vulgare, which in Italian say finocchio, attracts syrphids, spiders, ladybugs. We know that Phoenicum vulgare for famous uso, which use this plant to give the special ingredients and special aroma to famous uso that even me, that I don't drink alcohol, I like to taste this somehow, and especially I found it good with sweets too, with dry sweets or desserts. And here we see a beautiful lady, which is considered a symbol of organic agriculture. It is a beneficial insect, which mainly is considered that attacks some insect species which are for us pests. From the other side, it is very delicate. It can stay only in the clean environment without pollution, and that's why for us the symbol of lady beetle is the symbol of the clean environment, of the healthy ecosystem. You have one table here which consider different groups of insects which attack a certain group or a certain species of pests. And on the right side, the last column, you have the plants or the habitat that is suitable for this beneficial insect. And I see this very interesting. For sure, we have not all the information here, but we have some of the most important groups of beneficial insects and their pests which they control, and as I said, the suitable habitat. To not lose much time with explanation, because the table is in itself is very clear, and based on the fact that you can, or you probably will need it even for use in the future. And the exam, I will give this table and in a separate mode, so you will find it, you can download it in the repository where different literature and documents I have uploaded for you. And here you have a nice photo of what? You have a photo here of a vineyard with different strips of plants that people consider as weeds, but they are beneficial to us. And in this case, they don't do competition, keeping them in control. They don't do competition to the vineyard. From the photo, you now are familiar. For example, is present Phacelia. It is an important plant that is as a shelter for beneficial insects. Continue to speak about weeds, speaking about rotation, speaking about planning of the farm, planning of the crops that we sow on our fields. It is important to mention here that it is important not only to protect some weeds, but sometimes it is necessary, and I suggest that after a very careful selection, we can plant some so-called weed plants, because they can have flowers that can serve as a food and shelter for the beneficiary insects that, as I said, will attack the pests. Looking at this point of view, size, color, and the shape of the flower can limit kinds of beneficial insects that can access their food. Flowers that are shelter and good for natural enemies are small, not tubular and open. I want to remind you here that natural enemies, so sometimes we call them beneficial insects, are small parasites and predators of pests. So we call beneficial insects, but for the pests, they are not beneficiary because they are feed on them. They parasite them or they just eat them. Here you have two photos that show the case, another case when we have put or a farmer has planted flowers in one case, and another we have collards around cabbage. In case of collards, a collard can serve as a trap plant. This means in this case it is a trap for the pests. And the other one with Thanacetum as in fact a plant that attract the beneficiary insects. And this is the last photo to conclude this part of the lecture. We will still continue in the next part, again speaking about disease, pest, and weed control through biodiversity, different techniques, rotation, and so on. In this photo, you have the example of Phacelia, which is planted next to the wheat plants. It is proven that it reduces the infection from aphids. In the red colors, you have on the top of the photo, you have the link uh, of the source of this photo. Till the next time, I wish you a very pleasant study and life for sure. Bye bye.